Some events hit so suddenly, they leave you frozen, caught between confusion and disbelief. That Thursday evening was one of those moments. My husband, Patrick, was away on another business trip, leaving me alone in the quiet emptiness of our home. It was a familiar solitude I had learned to accept. I locked the door, seeking some space for myself, peace, maybe, but then, click, the door swung open. Light flooded the room, and I froze. I was startled, unsure whether I should be embarrassed, angry, or terrified. The silence shattered, leaving only the weight of a deep, unspoken tension between us. I'm Chloe. 30 years old, married to Patrick, the perfect guy, the kind of man women dream of. Our life? A picture-perfect fairy tale, a stunning home, a thriving career, and love that seemed unbreakable. But beneath this flawless surface, something was dying, and no one could see it. Patrick's always working, always gone. The late nights, the endless meetings, it became the new normal. I told myself it was for us, for our future. But now? Now I'm not so sure. We're drifting. The passion is gone, replaced by distance and silence. His health is failing. We barely touch anymore, and when we do, it's like we're strangers. The house is empty when he's gone. So quiet I can hear my heart breaking. Dinners alone, endless nights in a bed too big for one. I've tried everything to fill the void, books, yoga, shopping, but none of it works. The loneliness is a shadow that won't leave. I know Patrick loves me. I know he's trying. But love isn't enough when the connection is slipping away. I miss him, the him I used to know. But can it be fixed? I don't know. Then Arthur, Patrick's 27-year-old son, came back from abroad. He'd always been a shadow in our marriage, but hearing about him from Patrick, I knew they had a bond. When Arthur stepped into our home, everything changed. He was charming, tall, and handsome, impossible not to like. Suddenly, the house wasn't so cold, and the silence wasn't so loud. But one night, things went sideways. Patrick was away, and Arthur and I were alone. I'd just finished showering, towel around me, hair still wet. I didn't lock the bathroom door, thinking he was in the living room. Then the door swung open. Arthur was standing there, eyes wide, and before I could react, my towel slipped. The moment froze. Arthur turned away, muttering an apology, bolting out of the room. I stood there, shaking, humiliated, confused. After that, everything shifted. Arthur avoided me, and I couldn't look at him either. The tension was suffocating. Patrick had no clue. But the worst part? I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. The heat in Arthur's eyes, the tension in the air, it ignited something inside me. Now, every time I saw him, my pulse raced. What was happening to me? I knew I shouldn't be feeling this way. Patrick was the man I loved, the one who trusted me completely. But every time he was away, and it was just me and Arthur, something shifted. The initial awkwardness between us turned into something I couldn't ignore. It was a feeling I didn't dare name, a turmoil that gnawed at me. Arthur tried to keep his distance, but the more he avoided me, the more confused I became. That look in his eyes the day of the bathroom incident, it was more than surprise. There was something unspoken there. I told myself it was just an accident, but I couldn't forget it. And the more I tried, the more I was consumed by thoughts I couldn't control. I wasn't myself anymore. I found myself watching Arthur, every movement, every glance, every smile. I started creating chances for us to be near each other, even if it was just a simple request or a lingering conversation. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling inside me was a fire I couldn't put out. Arthur sometimes looked at me with confusion, maybe even curiosity, but I wondered, did he sense something? Was I the only one affected? Then, Patrick left for a week-long business trip, and it was just me and Arthur in the house. I told myself it would be like before, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Since the bathroom incident, there had been a tension between us, an unspoken conflict I didn't want to face. One afternoon, I asked Arthur to help with a small job in my bedroom. I knew it wasn't urgent, but I wanted to see his reaction. I wore something a little more revealing than usual, positioning myself close to him. A casual touch of the hand, a lingering look. I could feel my pulse quicken, testing the limits of both of us. Arthur didn't respond as I hoped. His eyes were confused, but he kept his distance. "Just leave it here," he said, voice firm. He finished quickly, stepping back. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, avoiding my gaze. I shook my head, my heart sinking as he walked out, not looking back. Later, when Patrick called, I did my best to sound normal. But when the call ended, the gnawing feeling inside me only grew stronger. I knew I was crossing a line, but no matter how hard I tried to push it away, Arthur's image lingered, his awkward glance in the bathroom, the careful distance between us. I was losing control, and I didn't know how to stop. I closed my eyes, but thoughts of him consumed me. Every time our paths crossed in the house, my heart raced. Arthur had changed, silent, distant, avoiding my gaze. Yet, in fleeting moments, I sensed something more. Was he fighting it too, or was I just fooling myself, justifying the fire inside me? Then one Thursday night, everything between us shattered. Patrick had been gone for almost a week. The house was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. I hadn't felt this alone since the day I married Patrick. The emptiness gnawed at me, and I couldn't escape it. Lying in bed, the ache grew unbearable. A sudden thought, bold and reckless, flashed in my mind. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and searched for anything to ease the rising need. I told myself it was just a distraction, a way to fill the silence. But as the images on the screen pulled me deeper, I lost track of everything. In my haze, I forgot to lock the door. Maybe deep down, I didn't care anymore. I needed something to fill the void. And then the door opened. I froze. Arthur stood there, eyes wide in shock. For a brief moment, we locked eyes, no words, just raw confusion. I quickly pulled the blanket over me, heart pounding, a mix of fear and shame flooding my chest. My heart raced, torn between fear and a crippling shame. I'm sorry, Arthur stammered, eyes dropping to the floor. He quickly shut the door and left, leaving me in a storm of emotions. I sat there, trembling, unsure how long I'd been frozen in place, overwhelmed by the confusion and shame filling the room. Then the door creaked open again. Arthur stepped inside, his eyes full of confusion, but also something darker, determination. My pulse spiked. I hastily pulled the blanket up. "Arthur, what are you doing?" My voice shook. "Get out. This can't happen." But Arthur didn't answer. He moved closer, eyes locked on me, as if trying to break through every defense. Before I could react, he sat down on the bed, his hand trembling as it brushed my shoulder. "Sister, is it that Dad doesn't satisfy you?" he asked, his voice low but both probing and tearing himself apart. His question made me freeze. I shook my head, trying to keep my fragile composure. "No, it's not like that, Arthur. We can't," I said, but my voice was so weak that I couldn't believe it. Arthur moved closer, his eyes never leaving me. "You're seducing me, aren't you? Your eyes, your gestures, everything says it. Or you need me." I opened my mouth to deny, but for some reason, the words of denial caught in my throat. My body stiffened, unable to react, and my eyes, despite my desire to avoid them, were drawn to his. "No, Arthur, I don't." I tried to speak, but my flushed face and flustered gaze completely betrayed my words. As if reading my mind, Arthur leaned down, wrapped his arms around my waist, and pulled me into his embrace. The warmth of his body made me lose all ability to resist. I trembled but did not push him away, nor did I say another word. "You don't have to say anything. Just look at me, and I'll know," his voice whispered in my ear, gentle but searing through all my defenses. I wanted to push him away, but instead, my hands tightened on his arms. The conflict inside me vanished the moment his lips touched mine, soft yet all-consuming. In that instant, all reason crumbled. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't stop. We came together, no words needed, just overwhelming emotions. The light from the hallway spilled through the crack in the door, silently witnessing the destruction of all the boundaries between us. When it ended, I lay in his arms, my body and mind a tangle of mixed emotions. Regret began to seep in, but with it came the undeniable feeling that I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. I didn't know how I'd face the next day, but in that moment, I knew everything had changed between Arthur and me. From that day on, there were no more shy glances or awkward silences. Every time we crossed paths, our eyes spoke a language only we understood. No longer just stepmother and stepson under the same roof, we became something more, something secret. Arthur filled the emptiness inside me, emotionally, physically. Every touch, every word from him filled the void I'd never realized was so vast. I knew this couldn't last forever, and soon, Arthur announced he was returning abroad to finish his course. The news hit me like ice water, but I hid the turmoil inside. On the day he left, I kept a calm face, though each day the thought of him leaving made my heart heavier. At the airport, Patrick and I saw him off. Arthur hugged Patrick, then turned to me. I held him longer than necessary, a hug filled with a secret neither of us could explain. Patrick smiled, unaware. Only Arthur and I knew that hug meant everything. "Take care of yourself," Arthur whispered, his voice strained, yet calm. I didn't answer, just held him tighter, unwilling to let go. When he walked away, the emptiness hit hard. The house grew eerily silent. I went through the motions of daily life with Patrick, but the void left by Arthur felt suffocating. I tried to ignore it, telling myself time would heal, but the emptiness was deeper than I'd anticipated. Lying next to Patrick at night, I felt trapped. His love wasn't enough anymore. I knew I couldn't go on like this. One evening, after dinner, I decided to speak up. "Patrick." I hesitated, my voice trembling. "I feel like we're drifting apart. You're always working, and I feel alone in this marriage." He put down his chopsticks, regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I didn't realize you were feeling this way. My work consumed me, but you should have been my priority." "I don't blame you," I replied softly. "But something has to change. Or we won't make it." He was silent for a long moment. Then, he squeezed my hand. "You're right. I've been so caught up in work, but I'll change. I promise." A few days later, Patrick told me he was quitting his job. "I've saved enough for us. I want to make it up to you and enjoy life with you." I was shocked but relieved. He finally understood what I needed. In the days that followed, Patrick spent more time at home. We went for walks, cooked together, and talked long into the night. Though some parts of my heart remained hidden, his presence started to fill the void. I didn't know what the future would hold, but for now, I could find peace with the man I had chosen. After Arthur left, life slowly returned to normal. Patrick kept his promise, spending more time with me, and we tried to rebuild our connection. But deep down, I knew the cracks in my heart couldn't heal that easily. Arthur's memory haunted me, reminding me of the mistake I'd made. I had hoped that filling the emptiness would bring happiness, but instead, guilt and regret followed. Lying beside Patrick at night, I questioned if I deserved his love. I realized my biggest mistake wasn't just the betrayal, but not being honest about my feelings. Loneliness should never justify crossing boundaries. I should have communicated with Patrick instead of letting things fester. The lesson is clear: be honest with your partner. If you feel lonely, talk about it. Don't let silence breed regret. Take care of yourself and maintain boundaries, because a moment of weakness can destroy what you cherish. Marriage requires love, trust, and openness. If I could go back, I would choose honesty and communication over the mistakes that still haunt me. Thank you for listening. I hope my story serves as a reminder to cherish what we have and always consider the consequences of our actions.